Okay, for this video, we'll be demonstrating the use of the if function and the Vlookup function. So to illustrate this, here is a list wherein we have the following columns. We have the name of the employees, for example, and the rate per hour, then the number of hours worked, and then we have gross pay, deductions, and net pay. So let's say initially, these are the formulas. So for gross pay, it is equal to rate times hours. So let's now compute for that. So equal to rate. So rate is at column B2. Then asterisk for multiplication. And then we have hours. So C2. So the formula will be equal to B2 times C2. So if we copy the formula going down, then we have here the gross pay. So allow me now to format my values also for this one. So I'll just select and then click on the comma style. Then for deductions, what will be my deduction? It's equal to 5% of gross pay. So my formula will be equal to, so 5% is 0.05, then multiplied by gross pay, which is actually D2. So I'll just press enter key, so that will be my deduction. And then let's first compute for net pay. Net pay is equal to gross pay minus deduction. So net pay, so equal to gross pay, which is at column D2, minus, and then E2. That's a deduction. So gross pay minus deductions. So once I press enter key, there's now my formula. So all I have to do now is to copy. So select both cells and then copy downwards. So I have here now my table, my payroll table. Okay. Now what if my formula will be a different one? So let's say for my formula for deduction, instead of like this, it will be something like this. Gross pay. So let's say, for example, this will be my formula for deductions. Okay, so let's say, for example, this will be my formula for deductions. So it is conditional now. It's not like before where we have only one formula for deduction. But this time around, it is conditional. So it says here that if gross pay is lesser than 20,000, we use 5% of gross pay. If not, that means it is equal or higher or greater, then we're going to use 7% of gross pay. So in this case, we have two formulas. Now, if that's the case, then this is the function that we will be using. So here we have the if function. So the if function has the following format. So if, then we have the logical test here. So the logical test should produce a true or a false value. So if this value is true, then this is the value that will be returned by the function, or that will be given by the function. So returned by the function. And then if this logical test is false, then this is the value that will be returned by this function, the if function. So as a reminder, these are the relational operators. So if we use this, usually we have a true or a false value. So we have the lesser than, greater than, less than or equal, greater than or equal, not equal, and equal. So these are the relational operators. We can also have Boolean operators, but we'll have more of this as we go on. So what will now be my formula? So it says here 5% if gross pay is lesser than 20,000. So I'm going to change my formula. So I'm going to have here if gross pay. So whereas gross pay is in that position is located at D2. So that is where the gross pay is located. Is lesser than 20,000. So that's my condition. So if it is lesser than 20,000, what is our formula? 5% of gross pay. So we have 0.05 times gross pay. If not, so else, that means it is equal or higher. We use 0.07 times GP, D2 gross pay. So we can also factor out D2 and place it outside the if function, but just place it inside. So just press enter key, and that's it. So there's an increase here because it is now using 7%. So if we copy, so that will be our formula. So this one is still using 5%, while the rest is already using 7%. So let's say, for example, we lessen this to 300. So you notice of the change in our, so it's now using 5%. So that is now our formula. Now we can also have what we call the nested if function. Oh, by the way, so let's take a look again at the formula. So that's the formula. So if D2 is lesser than 20,000, comma, that's my logical test. Then I have 0.05 times D2. That's my true value. Then comma, 0.07 or 7% times D2. That's my false value. Okay, so let's try to make some changes with our formula. So what if sorry. So let's say that this is now my formula for my deductions. So if gross pay is lesser than 20,000, I'm still going to use 5%. If it is greater than 20,000 and lesser than 30,000, then I'm going to use 7%. So I will not be using 7% automatically if it is not lesser than 20,000. So it should be, the condition should be, it should be greater than 20,000 or equal to 20,000, but it should be lesser than 30,000. That is a time where I'm going to use 7%. So if the gross pay now is higher than or equal to 30,000, then I'm going to use 9%. So what will now be my formula? Okay, so we have 5, 7, and 9. So the first one is still the same. If it is lesser than 20,000, we use 5%. But the false value is no longer the same because we don't automatically use 7%. So here, it is still conditional. We have to test if the gross pay is lesser than 30,000. So again, it will only go to this part if it is not lesser than 20,000. So we don't need to test anymore if it is lesser than 20,000. So I'm just going to place it if D2 is lesser than 30,000. So you notice I have an if inside another if. So we have a nested if function. So if it is lesser than 30,000, that's the time I'm going to use 7% of my gross pay. If not, then that's automatic. So if it is not lesser than 30,000, it means it is greater or equal to 30,000. And our formula says that we're going to use 9%. So that ends my if function. So you notice I have two close parentheses because I have two if functions here. So I have an if function inside another if function. So let's just review. If the gross pay is lesser than 20,000, then we use 5% of D2, which is our gross pay. That's D2. If not, then we test again if D2 is lesser than 30,000. If yes, then that means we're going to use 7% of D2. If not, then that means it is higher or equal to 30,000. So we use 9%. Then we can just press enter key. So I can just copy this, and that will be our formula. So again, let's review the formula. So again, D2 is lesser than 20,000, we have 5% times D2. If D2 is lesser than 30,000, we have 7% times D2. If not, then we have 9% of D2. Be sure that your parentheses are always balanced. So the number of open parentheses is always equal to the closed parentheses. So let's add one more. Why not? So what if now our formula is so let's say I added another range. So if my gross pay is greater than 30,000 but lesser than 40,000, I use 9%. But if my gross pay is now higher than or equal to 40,000, I use 11%. So what will now be my formula? So here, instead of automatically 9%, I'm going to insert another if, because we're going to use 9% only if the gross pay is not lesser than 30,000. That means it is greater or higher than 30,000, but it should be lesser than 40,000. So we have here if D2 is lesser than 40,000. Again, it will only go to this part if this is false. If this is false, then that means that our gross pay is higher or equal to 30,000. So then we just test if it is lesser than 40,000. So if not, that means it is higher than or equal to 40,000. So we use 11%. So 0.11 times gross pay, which is D2. And then our close parenthesis for our if statement. Okay, so let's take a look at our function. So let's review. If gross pay D2 is lesser than 20,000, we use 5%. If it is not, that means it is higher or equal to 20,000. So we test if it is higher than or equal to 20,000 but lesser than 30,000. Then in that case, we use 7%. If not, then that means it is higher or equal to 30,000. So we test if it is also lesser than 40,000. So if it is lesser than 40,000, we use 9%. If not, then that means it is higher or equal to 40,000. Then we use 11% times D2. So that will be our formula. So if we copy the formula, so that is now our deduction. We can increase other, let's say for example we use 85 here. So you notice a big increase in our deduction because it is now using 11%. Okay, so relative to the if function on the before that, allow me to insert a column here. Insert. So I have here now a new column. Still another column. Okay, assuming that this is our department code and this is our department. Let's say we have departments 1 2 3 1 1 2 2 3 3 1. These are our departments. So we have 3 departments, for example. So we can also use if here to determine the department, but instead of using if, I'll be using lookup. So let's say we can use if the code is equal to 1, then this will be the department, etc. I'll just show you one, for example, but it's not the function we're going to use. If b2 equals 1, then let's say for example you have the admin department. If not, we have for example the sales department. So you notice I have here admin. If I place here 2, it becomes sales. If I place here 3, it's still sales because I have only 2 options here, equal to 1 or not equal to 1. So we can also use if, but instead of if, I'll be using another function. So I can create here a table. So let's say 1 2 3, these are the department codes I use. Then let's say for example this is the admin department, this is the sales department, and this is the production department. So let's say these are the departments. Of course in reality we have more departments. So how do we determine the department if we are given the code? So here is, I'm going to introduce another function, which is the Vlookup function. So the Vlookup function has the following syntax or format. So we have Vlookup, then this is the lookup value, or this is the value that we will be searching inside our table array. So in this case, these are our lookup values. So we will be searching for this inside our table. So this is our table. So let's go back. So we look up value. This is our value table array. I have shown you the table a while ago. Then the column and the range lookup. By the way, let's go back to our table. This is our table, and this is column 1 and column 2 of the table. So we can have more than 2 columns, but in our example we have column 1 and column 2 of our table. Then going back to our formula syntax, so we have for the next value. So we have, by default this is true, then that means we're going to look for the closest match, and false, we have the exact match. So for the closest match, the lookup value should be sorted, but for exact match, even if it is not sorted, so it's just okay. So here we're going to use the exact match, so we're going to use false here. So what will be our formula? Okay, so equal to Vlookup again. So you can see here the syntax also. First we have the lookup value. As I've said a while ago, these are the values that will be looking up in our table. So that will be my lookup value B2. Then comma the table array. So where's now my table array? So I'm going to select my table array. Okay, so that's L1 to M3, L1 colon M3. That's how we specify the addressable range. But here, this should be declared absolutely. So why? Because if we copy the formula going down, the address of the table should always still be the same. So how do we make the address absolute? We just press F4. So that's it. It is now absolute. Comma. And then, so what's next? So we have the column. So what will appear here is what? At the second column of our table. So we specify here 2, and then since we have the exact match, we can use false, and then we just press enter. So number 3 is the production department. So what if I copy the formula? So I have here now the values. So what if I change this 1 to 1? It becomes admin. If I change it to 2, it becomes sales. 3, production. Okay. So that's an example of using the Vlookup. So we have Vlookup, then we have the lookup value, then comma, next we have the table. So take note that the table should be in absolute address. So, and then we have here the column that will be returned by the value. So if you use 1, this will return also the code. And false, that means we're going to have the exact match. So if you notice, if I double click here, the table address will always be the same, L1 to M3. L1 to M3. Okay, so next, let's use that for our deduction. So this is our formula for deduction. You notice it is quite lengthy. We can also create a table for that. So let's say, for example, from 0, the next will be 20,000 and above. We have 30,000 and above, and 40,000 and above. So the rate we're going to use here is 5%, 7%, 9%, and 11%. So this will be my table. So that means from 0 to before 20,000, 5%. From 20,000 to 30,000, 7%. So that's before 30,000. So 30,000 and above, but not equal to 40,000, 9%. Equal to 40,000, we have 11%. So here now, we're going to change our formula. Or just to compare, I'm going to insert another column here. I'm going to place here also deductions, so that we can compare the two values. Okay, so I'm going to use here equal to Vlookup. So what will be our lookup value? We're going to compare the value of gross pay to this to our first column. So that means our lookup value is F2, our gross pay, comma. So next will be the table array. So this is my table array. I'll select the whole table and then press F4 so that we have the absolute address. And then what it should return the second column. And then this time we don't have an exact match, so we only have the closest match. And then we multiply this by the value of the gross pay, because again this only returns a percent. So we multiply that by gross pay, which is actually F2. Okay, so you notice they are equal. Here I'm using if, here I'm using Vlookup. if I copy, so you notice they are exactly equal, but we use here the Vlookup function. So again, Vlookup, F2 will be the value that will be referencing. So allow me to hide this first so that we can see. So Vlookup, so F2 comma, that's the lookup value. The next will be the table array. So this is the address from 01 rather to P4. So 01 up to P4, and then absolute. Then column 2 because we'll be returning this value, and then true because we're not going to have the exact match. You notice the values here are not exactly equal to 0, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, but we're going to get the closest match. So then multiplied by F2, so over per set times F2. Okay, so that is now an example of the use of Vlookup. Okay, thank you very much for viewing this video.